Rapid pace out here early in the second. LeVert, hey, knocks it down. Rondo's on the run. Stops, hits Love. Love fires. Cavs reset with a fresh 14. Under 3 to go in the half. Garland works on Holiday. Lost it for a moment. Shovels to Mobley. Garland, step back three. Drew a foul. Knocks it down.
Oh, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, general ages, you are listening to episode number 48 of the All Things Cleveland Cavaliers Podcast. As always with you today, I'm the general manager of Believe Win Media, Brandon Lewis, here today to replace Joey Snyder, who is once again in Hawaii. Joey will be back next week, but filling in for him this week, we have the host of the brand new Browns and Orange podcast alongside Dean Samples here at Believe Win Media, our very own Clarence Wilson.
How's everybody doing out there? Thank you for having me on, Brandon. I really appreciate it. Ready to get some cab takes off.
Hey, Clarence, no problem. Of course, Clarence was with us when we did our draft special back in June. Of course, the Cavs ended up taking Agbaji out of Kansas, but now Clarence Agbaji isn't even a part of the team because the Cavs have brought in Donovan Mitchell. He was introduced today as a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers, showing up in that orange and brown outfit, celebrating with the city that Browns' great win on Sunday. And yeah, you know, Donovan Mitchell, man, it's real now. There's no going back. He's a Cleveland Cavalier. What was your thoughts when all this kind of went down?
A little bit of shock. It was one of those things where, you know, you had heard things, but kind of like what he was talking about, all signs pointed to New York. So even when even after RJ Barrett signed that deal, I was like, well, you know what, they gotta have some kind of contingency plan still to bring Mitchell in. It looks like our man Kobe slid in the back door and just stole him from him, which I love.
Yeah, you know what I found interesting is, you know, it's been reported that the Knicks reportedly had a better offer for Donovan Mitchell than the Cavs, but the Jazz wanted to send Mitchell to Cleveland because they felt like it was quote unquote punishment for Donovan Mitchell because obviously, you know, big city New York. But as Mitchell said today, it really doesn't make any sense because he really wants to win. And when you look at the Cavs now with the addition of Mitchell, with Darius Garland, with Jared Allen, and with Evan Mobley, that's 4 all-stars. And they wanted to punish Mitchell because they didn't think that he wanted to live in Cleveland. Well, you just gave Donovan Mitchell an even better chance of getting a potential ring down the line with this young and up-and-coming Cavs team.
Absolutely. I read something today that's I just shut every window down, of course, but I read something that Utah actually said that Cleveland might have had like the better offer as far as picks go and players. Outside of RJ Barrett, I mean, who do you really want on the Knicks?
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't see. I feel like what they ended up getting back from us was much better than what the Knicks were going to offer, and I really doubt that they would have wanted to part with Barrett to get Mitchell, because then it's almost like I wouldn't call it a lateral move, but you're losing a key piece of your future to bring in Mitchell. So I think the Cavs made out on this deal. I really am happy with the way this turned out. Still some holes in the roster, but we'll dive into that, I'm sure.
Yeah. You know, Clarence, and I think the thing is, right, is ever since the season ended, me and Joey sat here for how many weeks and how many months saying, what are they going to do with Colin Sexton? Because, of course, it was reported that you know, the Cavs offered him a qualifying offer. He didn't take it. Nobody really knew what was going on. And there was really a lot of debate in the Cavs fan base going into that draft, if you recall, because the question was, do we trade the pick for a potential superstar, or do you keep that pick and try to develop and use your own core? The Cavs ended up making the pick and then trading Agbaji, who again we think we project him to be a nice player, but we don't know that. We certainly hope he succeeds in Utah. But to be able to go out and get a guy like Donovan Mitchell, as I've been saying throughout the whole offseason, really, he is a guy that when Darius Garland is not on the court can create his own shot. And the Cavs finally did something that not a lot of teams and really all of sports do, and that is be aggressive and go fix what I believe was their biggest problem last season, which was, again, when Darius Garland was not on the court or when he was injured, they really could not score the basketball.
Absolutely. I mean, this even goes back further to after the Kyrie trade. Uh, LeBron and that cast of characters, every time LeBron stepped off the court, there was nobody to back him up. I remember in the Golden State series in 18, 17 and 18, or 18 pretty much, sorry. As soon as LeBron would step off the court, if the Cavs were maybe down by like 5, by the time he got back on the court, they were down by 13 to 20. So it's one of those things where you gotta have a 1 and a 1A. And we absolutely have that now with Mitchell. I don't foresee the Cavs having any issues as long as JB, which he's done a masterful job as is, with the rotations. But as long as he staggers these guys, has, Garland on the court for a little bit, then Mitchell lets these guys get their rest and obviously starts and closes the games with both of them on the court. But I'm very, very, very happy. A little concerned about the smallness of the backcourt, but you can't really pass up a chance to get, a 25, 26 point per game score like Mitchell.
Yeah, I mean, the smallness of the backcourt, you mentioned it. It was my biggest concern when Colin Sexton, Darius Garland were both drafted in back-to-back drafts. I did not think that Darius Garland and Colin Sexton worked together. I did not think you could have very small 6'1" guards that did not play great defense together on the court. That being said, Mitchell is obviously 6'1" as well, but he has a 6'10" wingspan. And now that the Cavs, obviously the team that just had mostly Garland and Sexton, there was not that much talent around them. Well, now you have Jared Allen, you have Evan Mobley, you have Isaac Okoro, which by all accounts seem like he's ready for a breakout year at that small forward position. So you cannot really double team Donovan Mitchell, and if Mitchell can just play what I would say is passable defense with a guy like Jared Allen in the middle, just like he had with Rudy Gobert in Utah. This Cavs team, what do they do really well? They get out, they play defense, and they run. And you cannot now just double team somebody in the corner and hope they make a three. You have to honor the defense. And I think it's going to make the Cavs not only a lot more offensive team, but a lot better defensive team because they're going to put a lot of pressure on opponents to score the ball.
I 100% agree with that. The fact that right now you have two dynamic players in the backcourt, either one can light you up for 30. You got our front court right now. The primary cogs are Mobley and Allen playing great defense, both of them. And we saw both of them be able to step out on the perimeter a little bit and guards, smaller guards and stuff like that from going in. So I think the Cavs are in a great spot. They're in a great spot. You heard Mitchell say it several times. He was paying attention last year. The Cavs were a 3 seed until they got just destroyed by injuries, and they just never were the same after, Garland went down and then J.A. went down. So, this healthy Cavs team, they're going to be scary, scary, scary.
Clarence, the craziest thought that just came to my head was, think about if Evan Mobley and Jared Allen did not get hurt last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Cavs are probably a top 4 seed in the conference, but they wouldn't have gotten that first-round pick from Indiana that they got in the Caris LeVert trade because that pick would have went to Indiana. Because the Cavs were decimated, they were able to miss the playoffs, which obviously there was a lot of back and forth on whether it was good enough to miss the playoffs or get in the first round and probably lose to Miami just to gain that playoff experience. But nonetheless, because they got their first round pick back, they were able to use that then to acquire Mitchell. I mean, if they make the postseason, and this Cavs team is certainly very good, but Mitchell just adds a whole nother element that, let's say, even if they were a top seed, they still needed this piece, and we all knew it. And so, in a way, it was the best thing for this team. You could say it was a blessing in disguise of what happened at the end of last year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I for one, once we got to the end of last season, I thought that they should trade the pick. I felt that they were young enough as is. And, a guy at 14, it's like, okay, you might be getting maybe a solid bench player or something like that. But I really thought that if they could use that pick in a deal to bring in, I didn't think it was going to be a player of this magnitude. I was thinking of, maybe another wing player, big three man,
Yeah.
3-and-D guy. That's why I was like, I'd rather see them use the pick on that. Well, the Cavs said, screw that. We're going to toss him and Colin and everybody, and we're going to bring in a bona fide superstar. So,
Yeah.
Kobe, my hat's off to you, brother.
That move to me was the only move for me justifying getting rid of Lauri Markkanen and that big man lineup, because it was so hard to defend that 3 7 foot lineup last year. I know obviously Markkanen struggled at the end of the year defensively, but still, I mean, that was a very hard thing to emulate, and we're seeing some teams trying to do it now. But in order to get Mitchell, yes, I think, again, totally giving up Markkanen, who was a good player for us last year, giving up Sexton, who, by all accounts was very well liked in the locker room, and then Abaji as well. But you could already tell this Cavs team, they have been in the gym all offseason. They are ready to work. Darius Garland and Caris LeVert were front and center today at the press conference for Donovan Mitchell, which I think is a good sign and a big sign to me. It shows team unity, and I think this team is one of the deepest teams in the league, and I don't think it's going to take very long for them to hopefully get their chemistry off the ground. And I think we're potentially looking at a top 4 seed, and I've been even throwing out here, as we've had some guests come on. Of course, Joe Yule came on last week for Joey. I've even thrown out, like, you can make an argument to me, Clarence, that the Cavs are the second best team in the East, right behind Milwaukee, because Miami's getting older. I don't necessarily trust Boston. I thought Milwaukee was better than them last year outside of the Middleton injury. And Philly you can't trust because of the history of Embiid and Harden's health.
Oh yeah. It's an easy argument to make to say the Cavs are a top 4 seed. And I completely agree with you that you can make the argument that they are the second best team in the East. If you really look at them from top to bottom, they are deep. That's one of the biggest things. They have lots of guys that can actually play. They're not just, necessarily role players. These are guys that can come in and make an impact scoring the basketball. So, and that's become the name of the game in the NBA. So I would honestly say that you got Milwaukee, Boston, and then I think kind of after that, it's kind of a crapshoot. I feel like the Brooklyn, they have the firepower, but not much else around it.
As I've said, Brooklyn can be a top 5 team. They could also be not very good either. They are certainly a wild card. We all know what went on with them this offseason. But, when I take a look at this Cavs roster, I kind of see, I think we have 12 very good players on this team that you can say are locked to make this roster. Obviously, you got the starting 5 in Garland, Mitchell, Okoro, Mobley, and Allen. But then obviously you're going to have Kevin Love coming off the bench. You got Caris LeVert coming off the bench. You have Robin Lopez, who I think is a very underrated signing. He's going to bring toughness to this Cavs team. That's something they did not have last year. Then obviously you got the 2 point guards with Ricky Rubio, who they brought back, which was a huge missing piece when he went down last season, along with Renaud Nato, who's going to back up Garland while Rubio is still recovering from his torn ACL. But then I think you can throw in a guy like Omar Stevens and a Dean Wade, who played big minutes for this team in certain spots. I mean, me and Joey were going back and forth last year talking about Dean Wade had arguably the weirdest minutes on the team. Some nights he played 35 minutes. Other nights it felt like he barely played at all. So, I mean, this team has players on it. They've done a great job developing some of their undrafted talent, like a Dean Wade, like a Lamar Stevens, and that's a credit to JB Bickerstaff and this coaching staff as well.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. I actually wrote an article for Believeland about this. When after Kobe made the Kyrie deal, I was pretty annoyed.
Yeah,
I was like, you traded one of the best players in the NBA for 5-foot guard with a bad hip, and Jay Crowder and some throw-ins and that number 8 pick. And I was like, you should have got more than that. Well, he has proven me, and I think a lot of Cavs fans were wrong. He's made masterful drafts, and I don't think enough is said about the development of players. Like
Good
Cavs
point.
player development team is phenomenal because you know what? As bad as the injuries got last year, as you said, Dean Wade was coming in and making an impact. Lamar Stevens coming in making an impact. These aren't guys that you really ever thought that might even get. You didn't think these guys would get any tick, let alone come in and
Yeah.
play well. So
Well, and Clarence, it's a great point you made about Altman, because I concur with everything you just recently said, about the Kyrie trend in the recent history. Because even going into last year, I was very pessimistic about the Cavs. I liked the experiment of the three big man lineup, but I still was not sure about Darius Garland's development. I wasn't sure that he was going to be this superstar point guard that obviously he blossomed into be. I wasn't sure about Isaac Okoro. We all know he certainly was struggling throughout the season. So there were some question marks. I thought Evan Mobley was a great pick at the third overall pick. I thought he was the best player in that draft, to be honest with you. But I still did not expect that huge Cavs jump that they had to go over 500. I mean, I only projected 20 wins. And yet here we are now, basically, 2 years after the Cavs have one of the worst rosters and one of the worst records in the league. We are legitimately, and we are not making this up, thinking of them as a potential championship, not just Eastern Conference, potential championship contender.
they've got the pieces. It's going to take a little bit of time. They obviously the roster needs a little bit more tinkering with, but I mean, as far as a core and a base, they're pretty well set up. I really like the way that the team is constructed. As I said, there's a hole here, hole there, but you look at what they accomplished last year while healthy. I mean, they were walking in and they were blowing teams out. They
Yeah, I
blowing
mean
out Milwaukee, blowing out
they
Brooklyn. I
exactly
mean,
they took out Milwaukee early in January, and we all thought the Cavs were
mhm.
legit at that point. I remember there was a game early in the season. The Cavs were at home against Golden State. I don't recall who exactly was out that game, but I know a lot of players were out that game. And the Cavs still fought Golden State for 3 quarters. Of course, that was during the time when all the COVID and everybody was out with protocols. Cavs still fought them for 3 quarters. They just ran out of gas at that point. But yeah, this team is set up to win now. But you've been mentioning for a little while here some holes that you think what tinkering could be done with the roster. Where do you think that they could potentially add maybe some depth, or where do you think maybe they need to shore up maybe the back end of that bench?
I've been pounding this drum for a long time. I still think, even with Okoro, I still think they need a 3-and-D wingman. If Okoro can step up his shooting game, he can't do those things where he scores 20 and then takes him 5 games to score. Takes him 5 more games to score 20 points combined in those 5 games. So it's going to take a huge step for him. But I've been pounding the table for a while, and a lot of this is due to what I said before, the Cavs development team. I'm a big, big, big Cam Reddish guy. 6'8", can play, 3,
Yeah.
4 positions, handle the ball, play defense. He just hasn't been put in those correct situations between Atlanta and then he gets dealt to New York. I just want to see the Cavs player development squad get a hold of this guy. We could insert him into the 3-man spot. Maybe if we have to lose Okoro in the deal, okay. But if not, we put him in the backup slot because he can play the 2 and the 3. I really want him here to round out this roster because you know what? He can come here and he doesn't have to do a whole lot. So the three spot is kind of like where I'm at, and I really want Reddish. That's my guy.
I agree with you. However, I don't think that there is a chance the Cavs are getting rid of Isaac Okoro.
Me neither.
I think one of the reasons why the Cavs made this Donovan Mitchell deal is because we've heard all these reports all off season about how great Isaac Okoro is. I was looking like the best player on the court with some of the best players in the NBA. And I think the Cavs are really believing in that Ivan for Okoro's sake and for the team's sake. I hope that they are right. I've said this all along. The Cavs currently have 18 people on the team. We know that only 15 can make it to the regular season. And that's going to include Ricky Rubio because there's not an IR spot or anything like that, like there is in football, obviously. So, I think the Cavs, I think they're still going to try to swap out a Jetty Osman, a Dylan Windler, maybe for a sign and trade, and maybe open up a spot for one of these kids they drafted, potentially Evan Mobley's brother Isaiah or a Luke Travers. If they impress in training camp, we'll obviously know more as training camp is exactly 2 weeks away from the time of this recording. But I think it certainly is possible that the Cavs can make maybe one more smaller move, and maybe it is going out and getting a guy like a Cam Reddish that you talked about, because that's where I agree with you is, yes, the Cavs have all this talent, but still, we know Isaac Okoro is a versatile player. He can play the 2 or the 3, but they have, 6'10" Kevin Love, near 7 foot Evan Mobley, near 7 foot Jared Allen. They don't have that really traditional 6'7", 6'8", big 3-and-D wing still that I promise you will win you ball games in today's league.
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the things, if you watch the playoffs last year, the big wing is kind of been taking over the NBA for a while now. And one of my bigger concerns with the team is that, yes, we have Mobley, we have Allen. So the rim is protected. The rim is protected. Well, I'm not concerned about that. But on the perimeter, if we can't get out and guard these 3-point shooters, that size down low doesn't matter if those guys are just pulling the ball out of the basket after a made bucket.
And as great of a defender as Okoro is, and we mentioned he's a great defender, that's only one great defender on the court on the wing. We just talked about Donovan Mitchell, as great as he is, he hasn't been known for the best defense in his career. So maybe if Mitchell does some of that defense, JV Pickers, Evan Grew are a defensive mind. Maybe he helps a little bit. But outside of that, Karis LeVert is an okay defender. He's not a great defender. Obviously we'll see what he does this year. As you know, I was kind of out on LeVert at the end of last season, the way he played in the play-in tournament. Hopefully the Cavs can kind of find him a role. I think that's going to be important as well is, last year they really just kept mixing up the rotation. A lot of that obviously had to do with injuries, but it felt like guys really did not know their role. So I'm hoping, regardless, whoever they bring in, can we get, a good starting 5 rotation set, hopefully? Can we get kind of 2 or 3 bench guys that we know are going to come in at this certain spot in a game and make an impact and help the starters expand the lead? Because it felt like too many times last year, it was either a Kevin Love game. Jetty Osman, as much as we all want to bang on Jetty Osman, he made some really key important plays, especially early in the season for this Cavs team that helped keep them afloat. These were guys that were coming off the bench and saving games because the starters could not score. So I think the Cavs, maybe they do need to go on and get that one more score, one more win to put them over the top. Because as we've seen here in the postseason, you mentioned it, it is depth, it is chemistry, and it is wings. And that's what the Golden States, that's what the Boston, that's what the Dallas is, that's what the key. The Final 4 teams, that's what they all had in common at the end of last season.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, like I said, my biggest concern is them just not being able to guard a Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum at the same time on the wing. Or, we're talking about Milwaukee with Middleton and Giannis out there. Like, it's just one of those things where I feel like we're just a little bit small at the 3. I think Okoro is going to be a solid defender. He played pretty solidly last year. The scoring, if the reports that we're hearing is true, his scoring is going to be much better. But I still think you need multiple guys that are able to guard.
And I don't think they have that guy off the bench.
No.
Obviously, Okoro is that person. But once you go to the bench, NATO, as we mentioned, is obviously going to be the primary backup until Rubio comes back. Then after that, NATO will probably not get much playing time. You have Rubio, you have Love, you have LeVert, and you have a guy in Robin Lopez who can protect the rim, which was their other problem last year. When Jared Allen went out, they couldn't protect the rim. So they solved that. That's why I'm wondering if maybe a Luke Travers, maybe a potential Isaiah Mobley, Evan's brother, maybe they surprise us and maybe they become that guy. Maybe Dean Wade is that guy potentially internally. But if they can't solve that, if they don't have that win coming off the bench, then I do agree. I think that they will make a move. And they're going to have to, as I said prior to the season. I think there's going to be some tough roster decisions that have to be made.
Oh yeah, for sure. I have a question for you though. Is there any wing out there that you would like to see them maybe go after? As I said, I'm a big Cam Reddish guy just because young. I think this is his fourth year. We don't have to worry about that whole max contract deal because he won't be getting a max. So him and Garland can be on the squad, and with the player development team that we have, I think he just fits. Is there a guy that you see that you like? You know what? He would fit really well here if we can make the move.
So my guy was unfortunately already signed, Montrezl Harrell.
Yeah.
I said it going into the offseason. I realized he was probably going to be too expensive, but I thought Montrezl Harrell, he could play the 3, he could play the 4, he could play the 5, and he's another one of those tough guys. And that was my other issue with this Cavs team last year. As much as we love Jared Allen, as much as we love Evan Mobley, I think the Cavs, maybe probably their most underrated offseason signing outside of Mitchell, may have been Robin Lopez, because Robin Lopez is a glue guy, and that is one thing the Cavs do not have. They do not have that guy that has been in the fire in big postseason playoff games on good championship teams, besides Kevin Love, obviously, that will get in there and scrap and make it tough. That is what the Cavs will get, and that's why I feel like when they grow, that's the type of guy that they will need to find. Again, maybe it's a veteran off the street late in the season. Maybe it's a trade at the trade deadline. But that's where I feel like you will find that piece. We mentioned at the very earliest top of the podcast, the Cavs are done developing kids. Even before the draft, me and you both said it. We kind of felt like that they were young enough. It's really, you keep developing the kids, but it's time to win now. You have enough of those young pieces. It's time to go get veteran pieces, winners that have surrounded you with championship experience, that can help these young guys grow as we get late into the season.
Absolutely, man. I think a lot of problems, a lot of times people, they look at the NBA and they think, oh, this guy doesn't average, 20 points a game. He sucks. No,
Hey,
there's
I'll tell you
only a
what.
few stars. There's only a handful of stars in this league. There's a handful of superstars, and then there's some stars, but 90% of the league is role players.
The
So,
perfect example of a perfect player for a team. How many times have we said it, right? Draymond Green for Golden State. Draymond Green maybe scores 4 points a game. But if you take him off that Golden State team, they are not the same team. He is a difference maker. You know what you're going to get with him every single night. And that is the thing with this Cavs team. They have to be consistent, because we're going to have a lot of young players and a lot of new situations growing up together. And if they do not get on the same page, there are going to be some bumpy roads, because these guys are young. And the biggest part of dealing with young kids growing up in age is consistency. And so that's why I say, yes, it's all great on paper, but we do have to take sort of a patient approach, at least at the beginning of the season, when they all try to get their chemistry underway.
oh yeah, just Mitchell said it himself, and it's been pretty well proven across the NBA. When we're bringing a player of the caliber of a Donovan Mitchell, you're just not going to walk out the gates and just start knocking teams out. It's going to take a little bit. I mean, you go back to the Miami Big Three with LeBron, Wade, and Bosh. I feel like after a little over 20 games, they were only maybe 2 games over 500,
Yep.
if not a little bit under. So chemistry is going to take a little bit of time. But the fact that Mitchell wants to be here, that he kind of knows these guys, he knows what the team is about. I think he's going to fit in, and I think I think maybe after I'd say about 30 games, I think that's kind of when we'll be able to tell what this team might be able to become.
And a perfect example of what you just talked about was the first season LeBron came back to Cleveland, the 2014-2015 season. The Cavs were under 500. I think they were like 19-20. They were the sixth seed at one point. Well, LeBron went to Miami for a week. It was a whole, fiasco. And then they came back and they made the moves for J.R. Smith. They ended up making the move for Mozgov, and that's what allowed them to propel. And again, as we know in LeBron's history, usually it's not that first year he's won the title. It's been that second year. And how many times, Clarence, have people tried to break Boston up? I mean, I admittedly, was one of those people that was thinking, hey, maybe it's time for them to break up Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. They've been together 4 or 5 years. What have they really accomplished? And boom, this year, yes, they might have caught a break or two, but literally every team in the NBA that wins a championship or at least makes it to the finals has to catch a break or two. And Boston got their opportunity, and they ended up winning the Eastern Conference. So, I mean, anything can happen.
I was hoping Boston would break up and we would make a move for Jaylen Brown. I'm a big Jaylen Brown fan.
Yeah.
So I was really hoping they'd be like, all right, you know what, we'll take none of our core three, but
it was so interesting because Boston did not start the season hot.
No.
Boston did not start the season hot. And so it just goes to show, man, 82 games is a long, long season.
Exactly. I mean, I want to say, I know they were calling for Udoka's head, after about 20, 30 games, and then Boston just got hot.
And he's a rookie head coach. And listen, some people criticize J.B. Pickers at the end of last year. Me and Joey were part of the criticism because it just did not feel like that they had any sense of rotation. But again, hopefully now that they have the players, hopefully now that they can kind of figure out that rotation, hopefully that they can settle in. And we just have to learn, man. Patience is a virtue because we've seen it all throughout Cleveland sports. I mean, you take a look, everybody wanted the Guardians to make a move at this year's deadline. They basically didn't. They're still in first place in the American League Central. Now, some people didn't want the Browns to make that big splash at quarterback. They did. We'll see how it works out when that quarterback obviously comes back after 11 games. But, I mean, every team is different. And I think this Cavs team, man, they felt like the opportunity was now, and they went for it.
Yeah, man. Like I said, it's still kind of shocking. You don't see the Cavs, I guess, making these kind of splashy deals outside of LeBron coming back and that whole deal. Bringing in Love, but you don't see the Cavs doing that kind of thing. And so, honestly, for what they did and what they gave up in the deal. For the caliber of player that they brought in, I'm ecstatic, man. I really cannot wait for this season to get started.
Clarence, before I let you go, to put this into perspective for you, since the Cavs brought LeBron James in 2003, this will be the first season of my lifetime. I'm about to turn 24 years old in a couple weeks. This will be the first season of my lifetime that a LeBron-less Cavs team will make the postseason. We think.
Wow. Wow, that's crazy. I'm a little bit older, so I go back to the Doherty and Mark Price days, World Be Free, and all that kind of stuff. But I'm just happy to see that when LeBron left the first time, we were on a path to nowhere. It was nice to see 4 years after LeBron left this time, this team they're ready to go.
Yeah,
they are ready to go.
All right, well, that will do it for this week's episode of All Things Cavaliers. Joey Schneider will be back next week. I'm sure he'll be telling us on all the great things, all the wonderful Hawaiian shirts he got down there in Hawaii. Thanks, Clarence, for joining us today. You're celebrating Victory Week, man. The Browns are 1-0.
That's right. I want to thank you for having me on, man. I love it. It's enjoyed getting these Cavs takes off and love me some Cavs basketball. And you know the routine. Go Cavs.
Yes, sir. And, of course, you guys can check out the Brown and Orange, the new Believe When Media podcast starring Clarence and Dean Samuels. That comes out every week as they'll be breaking down, hopefully, a lot of Browns wins this season. As I mentioned, Joey will be back next week. Until then, you guys know the deal, and that's to let them know